जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यमुनातीरावनचारी यमुनातीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यमुनातीरावनचारी यमुनातीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जनरंजन यमुनातीरावनचारी यमुनातीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपीजनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे हरे। कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय राधा गोपीनाथ राधे जय राधा गोपीनाथ राधा जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद। जय गौर हरि बोल जय गौर हरि बोल जय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल जय गौर हरि बोल। श्री श्री राधा गोपीनाथ की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। नित्य गौर प्रेमानंद हरि हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोप Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Today is the third and final class for Canto 1, Chapter 4 and 5, Srimad Bhagavatam in story form. So, thank you, everyone, for joining. And again, like I've said all 3 days, I'm still learning. So, please excuse me and forgive me if I make any mistakes. Before we start today, we'll start off with Mangalacharna. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapatakamalам Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tattva Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bhutermatviryahiма puro vibhu nirmaishate yadamosha Bhukte gunan shodashatmaka shodat krishista bhagavan vachamsi me Shri Krishna Sharanagatam Katha Amritam Sadatapi Vratam Bhakti Vedanta Marga Pantanam Sarvaloka Rishideva Janma Prasannam Sarvaloka Rishideva Janma Prasannam. Excuse me. So today we're going to finish off Canto 1, Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Sorry. Okay, so we'll start off with a very big question that arose from yesterday and the day before this class, that why did Vyasadeva write Srimad Bhagavatam? And there's a very nice verse in Canto 1, Chapter 7, and it is Anartho Pashyamam Sakshat Bhakti Yogam Adokshaje Lokasya Janato Vidams Chakre Satvata Samhitam. So in this verse, Anartha, it means unwanted miseries. So for us, we see unwanted miseries in the form of our day-to-day life, because it's something that we don't want to be doing for our whole life. It's an unwanted misery. So in this way, as normal human beings, we go through so many hardships, and it's very unnecessary for us to think. We think of ourselves that, why do we worry about so many different things? Why do we worry about all these things that are happening to us? And if you think about it from the perspective of a spirit soul, it's very unnecessary. And all these material troubles, it's very insubstantial, and that it's not really needed. It's extra pressure on our life as it is, and then on top of that, we have all these miseries. And if we have all these hardships, from our perspective as the body, we might think this is such a big thing, this is the end of the world, this is that. But the fact is, it's not. And that's why we need to understand that we're not the body, and that we're the spirit soul within. So for example, I'll give an example of myself. When I did HSC, our final year 12 exams, at that point in time, I can confidently say, and I can talk on the behalf of most of the year 12 students, that we think that it's the end of the world. Like if we don't get those marks, if we don't get into that university, even if you don't worry about the university, it's all the marks. So you can show off, oh, I got this mark, I got that mark. 100%. The moment we got our ATARs, I remember that second when I got my ATAR, I was thinking, oh, how am I going to tell people this? Or how is this going to happen? How is that going to happen? And it was just when I got into university, I found out, oh, wait, that's not what happened. In uni, you can switch it into what degree you didn't get into or what degree you wanted to get into and stuff like that. There's always something, there's always a bigger power looking over. There's always a bigger situation than which you think you are in. So, for example, I'll give a sporting example in cricket. When we play cricket, at that point when you're batting, you might think, okay, this is the most important place on earth, and I need to do something to win the game. And at that stage, if you lose the game, you think, oh, this is it, it's all over. And then 10 minutes later, you then see yourself as a refreshed person. You think, oh, what happened? 10 minutes, the whole world, which was supposed to like finish, nothing happened. So like that, all these troubles that we have in our day-to-day lives, let's say sickness, disease, all these things, they're all very small, minute things. If you look at it in the bigger perspective of life, there's so much more to our life in terms of bhakti, devotion, our spirituality as such, that we never look at those things and say, okay, that's the thing we should actually be working towards rather than all these material things. And this is not anyone else, this is all me, that chasing after material things, going again, waking up late, doing all these things that we're not supposed to do. We think that, okay, it provides us comfort, but the fact is it doesn't. So what is the solution to these miseries? In this same verse, is the first line, it says anartho pashmamam sakshat, that the solution is sakshat, and then the next line is bhakti yogam adhokshaje. So it says sakshat bhakti yogam adhokshaje, that that by performing bhakti onto the Supreme Lord, we can release ourselves from this mrityuloka, as Prabhupada used to call it, because it is a mrityuloka. If you think about it, our only job here, even though we might think we have all these jobs, is eventually we were born and then eventually we're going to die. And it's a massive planet, which is a graveyard, where people just are born and are dying, are born and dying. But in that period between birth and death, that's our working period, where we need to actually develop so that once we die, that's it. We don't have to come back and as another species of life or as another human life. So that should be our aim. So like I said, bhakti yoga madhokshaje, that by performing bhakti onto the Supreme Lord, we can release ourselves from this mrityuloka. So an example that in the previous yugas, you had to do severe penances and severe pious activities, stand on one leg on top of a mountain for hundreds and thousands of years, just so that you can chant the holy names of the Lord, so that you can attain some good. And we might think at that time, for us as humans, we are so weak right now that we can barely stand for 10 minutes on one leg with our hands up in the air. Like, we don't have to do all this tapasya, all these things. And if we compare ourselves to other yugas, it's very we might think, oh, we're born in such a tough yuga, or Kali Yuga, everything's going bad for me, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then we might think like this, but then there's a verse for this as well, a very beautiful verse. It's aho aho bir nakaler viduyate sudha sudhara maduram pade pade dine dine chandana chandra shitale yasha yashoda tanayasya giyate. I've quoted this verse multiple times because it's one of my favorite verses that I've come across. It's from the Padyavali, I think, and it's verse 42, and it's very, very beautiful verse. And it starts off by saying, aho aho bir nakaler viduyate. It says, oh, the scorching sun of Kali Yuga is only affected by one person is not affected by the scorching sun of Kali Yuga. Aho aho bir nakaler viduyate sudha sudhara. So not limited but unlimited. Madhuram pade pade, which means nectar or sweetness at pade, every step of the way. This one person has unlimited nectar at every step of the way. Dine dine chandra shitale day by day, this increases. And then who is this one person who isn't affected by any Kali Yuga, any of these scorching rays of Kali Yuga? Who is this one person? Yasha Yashoda Tanayasya Giyate. The one person is the person who glorifies the yasha of Yashoda's Tanayasya Giyate. So the one person, one who daily sings the glories of Yashoda's son Krishna, who is like the cooling of sandalwood, is not troubled by the days of Kali Yuga. For him, every step there is a torrential flood of the sweetest nectar. So this is such a beautiful verse. I'll repeat it again. Aho aho bir nakaler viduyate sudha sudara maduram pade pade dine dine chandana chandra shitale yasha yashoda tanayasya giyate. So this verse, it shows us that anyone who glorifies or chants the holy names of the Lord, aho aho bir nakaler viduyate, they can only taste madhuram, nectar, and thus they feel so much happiness. So once in a lecture, Prabhupada was asked, how do we know if we are spiritually advancing? We could be chanting, we could be reading, we could be doing everything correctly, but how do we know if we are spiritually advancing in this path of devotional service? And Prabhupada very finally he answered. He said, when you eat roti or when you eat food, do you need a certificate to say that you are fulfilled or you are full? No, you don't need a certificate to say, or you don't need someone else to say, oh, he is fulfilled. You just realize that you are fulfilled yourself. You feel that satisfaction when you eat something. And in that same way, if one is advancing spiritually, they will feel that fulfillment and that satisfaction from doing their sadhana and also from serving people, serving pure devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam 11.2.42, it says, Bhaktihi paranesh bhavo viraktir. That there are three things. Okay, so I'll give an example. There are three things that are happening when we eat. The first thing is that the hunger goes down. The second thing is that our body feels nourished. And the third thing is after we feel nourished, the body feels satisfaction and happiness after eating. And thus, that satisfaction comes from within. So in that same way, how does one find out if they are progressing in material life? Prabhupada says the hunger for material desires begins to disappear. For example, if we're doing our sadhana properly, that hunger that, every evening I will need to watch TV, that will slowly die off. The hunger that I need to be playing this video game, watching this movie, that will die away slowly. So the hunger for material enjoyment itself will come down. This is a very philosophical thing to say that if you do this, then this will happen. But it's the truth. We can see this in many great devotees who have properly done their sadhana, and once the sadhana has got to a level, their interest in other activities, other material activities, has disappeared. And this is very tough, and it can only be done through discipline and immense practice. So number two, just like food provides us the satisfaction, once we feel like we're advancing, we begin to feel that satisfaction, that peacefulness, and then we stop worrying about fulfilling all these material desires, and our taste is removed from it. So the point was that the food also provides nourishment and strength. Similarly, once we properly do our sadhana, we do everything properly, we get attached and we get nourished by this path of bhakti. So this is the glorious life of a devotee. So once another question arises that are we really tasting this life or this devotee life? And then if we are not, then why aren't we tasting this life? And it is because this Bhagavatam is to be read. No, this isn't. We shouldn't be reading the Bhagavatam. Narendra Prabhu says we should be drinking Bhagavatam. Pibata Bhagavatam rasa alayam muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhuvakaha. That this house of all rasa. So he says very funnily, Prabhuji says very funnily that in this verse it says laya. And in this modern way, when we are chanting, we are always laying down, or we're always we're always lazy when it comes to chanting. And I can speak for myself. In the morning, sometimes in the morning when I wake up and I try to chant, it can get very tough. And when you're laying down, you just feel like sleeping, or when you just have to really get out of bed and choose to make that decision early in the morning, so that the rest of your decisions throughout the day can also benefit. So how come we are not drinking this nectar? And because we're not drinking this nectar because we're always inattentively chanting. Again, I'm speaking for myself, that we might be chanting, we might be thinking of other things in the background. For example, when we're chanting, we might be watching TV in the background. When we're chanting, we might be talking to someone else in the middle. Let's say we're walking and we're walking with someone else. While we're chanting, in the middle of our round, we'll be talking to someone else. Again, and other ways, we watching something, talking to someone. Even when you're sitting down in a room, actually concentrating on the holy name, those little it's very hard to explain, but little things just come into your mind which just distract you. You think about your daily schedule, your day, what you're going to do after chanting, when you should concentrate in that present moment on the words that are coming out of your mouth. So again, why aren't we drinking this nectar of bhakti? Is because we're inattentively chanting. We might be chanting and we might be thinking of all these things in the background. So Jiva Goswami, he explains this in an analogy that bhakti or devotion, it must be compared to tushti, which is satisfaction, because they both take the form of pleasure. And pareshanubhava, the experience of the Supreme Lord, and pushti, nourishment, they are comparable both to sustain one's life. So finally, virakti, which is detachment, and shuddh apya, the cessation of hunger, must be compared both free one from hankering, and once we are freed from this hankering, they must experience shanti, which is peace. So an example, if one person who is eating, he not only becomes uninterested in other activities, but he increasingly becomes uninterested in the food itself, according to the amount of satisfaction he has. For example, if he is not enjoying the food, then he's uninterested in the food itself. But if his satisfaction level is higher, he's going to be concentrating on every bite he's eating. In that way, on the other hand, Jiva Goswami, although one is experiencing the blissful personality of Godhead, Krishna becomes uninterested in, we become uninterested in anything other than Krishna. We shouldn't become uninterested in anything other than Krishna. So we should be attached to Krishna. His attachment, Jiva Goswami's attachment to Krishna increased at every moment. So therefore, it is understood that the transcendental beauty and the qualities of the Supreme Lord are not material, since one never becomes satisfied by relishing the bliss of the Supreme Lord. So the word viraktihi is very significant in verse 11.2.42. That virakti means detachment, whereas tyaga means renunciation. According to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the word renunciation should be used and can be used in a situation in which we consider giving up an enjoyable object. So, for example, I'm renunciating from watching TV, or I'm renunciating from watching movie, from watching sport, from doing eating onion and garlic, eating meat, eating eggs, drinking alcohol. I renunciate. They're enjoyable objects in this material world, or that's what we think is enjoyable. But we can use this word of renunciation not just from our bodily conception of life, but also from material conception of life. So we consider everything to be potential paraphernalia in the service of Lord Krishna, as described in the verse before this, which is 11.2.41. One need not give thought to renunciation, for one uses everything in the proper service of the Lord. Yukta vairagyam uchyate. So there's another analogy given in this verse, which is that a hungry man, he consumes like a very tasty plate of food, and he's not interested in anything else which is happening around him. In fact, he considers other topics, other forms of distractions. They're like disturbances to his concentration on eating the food. So similarly, one who advances in Krishna consciousness, one who considers one who advances in Krishna consciousness considers anything unrelated to devotional service of Krishna an obnoxious disturbance. I feel this is a very important point here, that once we can't just stop all material activities that we are doing, but the fact that we can serve Krishna by presenting all our material activities to him is very important. So like I said, all these distractions are obnoxious disturbances. So such concentrated love to Godhead is described also in second canto of Bhagavatam, by the words of Trivena Bhakti Yogena Yajate Pumsam Param. And this is 2.3.10, that one should not make an artificial show of renouncing the material world. Rather, one should systematically train the mind to see everything as an expansion of the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I feel this is very important. Again, I'll repeat it. One should not make an artificial show of renouncing the material world. Rather, one should systematically train the mind to see everything as an expansion of the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I feel, again, this is such an important point, that everything that we're doing in our life, we don't have to stop it if we can serve it to Krishna. And yeah, so it'll be an expansion of his opulence. That's how we have to train our mind. So just as a hungry, materialistic person, a man, he sees this beautiful plate of food, immediately the desire he has is to put that food into his mouth. His mouth starts to like saliva starts coming out of his mouth. He wants to eat that food. He wants to consume it. In that same way, an advanced devotee of Krishna, upon seeing any material object, immediately he's eager. We might think this is odd. How can someone seeing a material object, why would he be eager if he's an advanced devotee of Krishna? He immediately becomes eager to use it for the pleasure and for the service of Krishna. Again, very important point here. Upon seeing any material object, he immediately feels the eagerness to use it in the pleasure of Krishna. And there's so many things in that form that in our day-to-day lives that we can serve to Krishna, even though it's a materialistic activity, but it can still be served. A very big example is our work. When we are working, even though not at work, well, we can, but after work, when we get paid, we use that money for the service of Krishna, then that work is actually worthwhile. Again, anything else, we grow. We're fond of gardening. We garden. We grow all these beautiful vegetables, beautiful flowers. What is the point of those flowers if we're not offering it to Krishna? There's no point of them. That's why you can still garden and grow all these beautiful flowers so that you can decorate the mandir of Krishna, so that you can offer it to Krishna. If you're fond of cooking, you cook beautiful food, not for yourself to consume, but for Krishna to consume, so Krishna can eat the food. We serve it to Krishna, and it shouldn't be for our own stomachs. It should be that, okay, Krishna has eaten, and whatever he has left is for me. So in that way, every single material thing that we do in our lives, it can be offered to Krishna in some way or shape. So without this spontaneous hunger to engage everything in the service of Krishna and to deep dive, to dive deeper and deeper in this ocean of love with Krishna, the so-called realization of God, or loose talk about religious life, is irrelevant. And to actual experience is actually of entering the kingdom of God. So according to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, the path of Bhakti Yoga is so joyful and so practical that even in the stage of sadhana bhakti, in which one follows rules and regulations about advanced understanding, one can perceive the ultimate result. And Rupa Goswami, he states that iha yasya hare dasye karmana manasagrira nikhalav apya avastho jivan mukata sa uchyate. As soon as one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Lord, Krishna, Paramanand, prapadyamasya, that giving up all these other activities, one is immediately considered to be a liberated soul. So the Supreme Lord Krishna is so merciful that even when a living entity understands that the personality of Krishna is the source of everything and surrenders to the Lord, Krishna, it is said that Krishna personally takes care of him, takes charge of him, and reveals to him within his heart that he is under the full protection of the Lord. Again, such a beautiful point here, that once we get to the stage where all our activities they're all surrendered, they're all for the purpose of pleasing and serving Krishna, He's so merciful. He personally, the Lord Supreme Personality of Godhead, personally takes charge and reveals his in the heart of that person, and he's then in the full protection of the Lord. So thus, devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and detachment from other objects, other material objects, they become manifest even in the beginning stage of Bhakti Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga begins at the point of liberation. Other processes have as their final goal salvation or liberation. So according to Bhagavad Gita, the very classic verse, Sarvadharma Prityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshasyami Masuchaha, that if one surrenders to Krishna, one is immediately liberated. Again, such conviction in this, how this is written. If one surrenders to Krishna, one is immediately liberated. And thus his career as a transcendental devotee, the wording here is so beautiful, that his career as a transcendental devotee with complete confidence is in the Lord's protection. So Srimad Bhagavatam as a whole has proven to be like a very beautiful, a very sublime literature, and it surpasses other Vedic scriptures due to its transcendental qualities. It is transcendental to all mundane activities and mundane knowledge. So in the shloka it is stated that Srimad Bhagavatam is not only a superior literature, but it is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literatures. So in other words, it is like the cream of Vedic knowledge. So considering all this, patient and submissive hearing is definitely essential. So in that same way, with great respect and with great attention, one should receive the message and the lessons imparted by Srimad Bhagavatam. So the Vedas again are compared to the desire tree because they all contain all the things knowledgeable by man. They deal with mundane necessities as well as spiritual realization. The Vedas contain regulated principles of knowledge, and thus they cover all sorts of genres, as we say, that social, political, religious, economic, military, medicinal, chemical, physical, metaphysical subject matters, and all that may be necessary to keep the body and the soul together. Above and beyond all of this are specific directions for spiritual realization. So that's regulated knowledge, which involves the gradual raising of the living entity to the spiritual platform. And that highest spiritual realization is the knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual tastes, is the rasa. So every living entity, beginning from Brahma, the first born living being within this material world, down to the most insignificant ant, they relish some sort of taste from their senses, like they desire that sense relishment, the sense perception. And these sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. So such rasas are of different varieties. And now I'm going to tell you the 12 varieties of rasas. So the first one is Rodra, which is anger. Second one is Abhuta, which is wonder. Third one is Shringara, which is conjugal love. Fourth one is Hasya, which is comedy. Fifth one is Vira, which is chivalry. The sixth one is Daya, which is mercy. The seventh one is Dasya, which is servitorship. The eighth one is Sakya, which is fraternity. The ninth one is Bhayanaka, which is horror. The 10th one is dasya, which is shock. And the 11th one is santa, which is neutrality. And the 12th one is vatsalya, which is parenthood. So the sum, the total of all these rasas is called affection or love. So primarily such signs of love are manifested in service, friendship, paternal affection, conjugal love. And when these five service, friendship, paternal affection, conjugal love, and adoration, when these five are absent, love is present indirectly in anger, in wonder, in comedy, chivalry, fear, and shock, and so on. So, for example, when a man is in love with a woman, the rasya is called conjugal love. But when such love affairs are disturbed, there may be wonder, anger, shock, horror, and sometimes love affairs between two people cultivate in ghastly murder scenes. If we've seen in Hollywood, Bollywood movies, all these, we see all the time in our present Kali Yuga as well, that all these love affairs between two people always end in some murder, some anger, some sort of just negative personalities, negative vibe altogether. So such rasas are displayed between a man and between an animal and an animal, and there is no possibility of exchange of rasa between a man and an animal, or between an animal and any other species of living beings within this mature world. So these rasas are exchanged between members of the same species, but as far as the spirit souls are concerned, there is only one, and there are only one qualitatively, and that is with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the rasas were originally exchanged between the spiritual living being and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the spiritual exchange, or the rasa, is fully exhibited in spiritual existence between the living beings and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, it is described that the Personality of Godhead is described in the Shruti mantras, in the Vedic hymns, as the fountainhead of all rasas. So when one associates with the Supreme Lord and exchanges one's constitutional rasa with the Lord, then the living being is actually happy. So these Vedic hymns indicate that every living being has its own constitutional position, which is endowed with particular types of rasato, or being exchanged with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this liberated condition, only this primary rasa is experienced in the full. In material existence, a rasa is experienced in a perverted form, which is temporary, and thus the rasa of material world is exhibited in the material form of anger and all the other ones that were listed before. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are like basic principles of activities, can understand that the false representation of the original rasas, they are reflected in this material world. So learned scholars, they seek the real rasa in spiritual form. So in the beginning, he desires to become one of the Supreme. Thus, less intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond the conception of becoming one of the spirit whole without knowing the different rasas. So in this shloka about rasas, it is said that it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of Srimad Bhagavatam, due to its being ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. The ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. So how can this be done? By submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of one's heart's desires. But one must be very careful, this is written in the purport, that one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. And Srimad Bhagavatam is exactly the right source, from the right source. So it was brought by Narad Muni from the spirit soul, and it was given to his disciple Vyasadeva. And the latter, in turn, delivered the message to his son Shukadev Goswami. And Srila Sukadev Goswami delivered the message to Maharaj Parikshit, and this was just 7 days before he died. So Srila Shukadev Goswami was a liberated soul from his birth. He was liberated even in the womb of his mother, and he did not undergo any sort of spiritual training after his birth. At birth, no one is qualified, and neither in like a mundane or in a spiritual sense. But Sukadev Goswami, due to him being a perfectly liberated soul, did not have to undergo any of like evolutions processes and all these for spiritual realization. Yet, despite him being a completely liberated person, situated in the transcendental position above the three material modes, he was attracted to this transcendental rasa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is adored by all liberated souls who sing Vedic hymns. So the Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to liberated souls than to mundane people. He is of necessity not impersonal, because it is only possible to carry on transcendental rasa with that person. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord it's narrated. So that narration is systematically depicted by Sukadev Goswami. So sorry. So thus the subject matter is appealing to all classes of people. Anyone who wants to become liberated, who seeks liberation, anyone who seeks a supreme as a whole, anyone who just wants that Krishna Prem. It includes everyone. So in Sanskrit, a parrot is known as a sukha, and when a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such bird, the sweet flavor is enhanced. So the Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Sukadev Goswami, who is compared to the parrot not only for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present that work in such manner that it appeals to all classes of men. Like I was saying in yesterday's discourse, that when someone is talking to someone, the information, the knowledge that he had shouldn't be changed, shouldn't be altered, and you shouldn't be adding in something of your own, because it's not trustworthy. And in that way, when we're talking to different age groups, different backgrounds, different everything, we have to be mindful of their backgrounds, of who we are talking to, and thus we need to change our dialect, change what we're saying in that way, so it's easier for everyone to understand. So he had the ability to appeal to all classes of men, and he was able to recite this, and that's why he was compared to a parrot. So the subject matter is presented through the lips of Sukadev Goswami, and that any sincere listener, this is a very important point, any sincere listener that hears submissively can once and only once relish this transcendental taste, which is distinct from all these perverted tastes which we have in this material world. So the ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet. Rather, it has come down carefully through the chain of disciplinic succession without change or disturbance. So foolish people, a lot of foolish people who are not in the transcendental disciplinic succession, they commit very big mistakes, blunders, by understanding the highest transcendental rasa known as rasadans, and without knowing, without following in the footsteps of Sukadev Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully, then they just ruin their lives because they don't follow it appropriately according to what Sukadev Goswami has said. So one should be intelligent enough to position the Srimad Bhagavatam by considering personalities like Sukadev Goswami who deal with the subject so carefully. So the process of disciplinic succession of Bhagavata school suggests that in the future also Srimad Bhagavatam is to be understood by a person is to be understood by a person who is factually a representative of Shukadeva Goswami. So a professional man who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam is legally, he's certainly not a representative of Sukadeva Goswami. Such a man's business is only to earn his livelihood. Therefore, one should refrain from hearing lectures of such professional men. Such men usually go to the most confidential part of a literature without undergoing the gradual process of understanding a grave subject or any subject at all. So this usually plunges into the subject matter of rasa dance, which is misunderstood by foolish classes of men. So some of them, this is a immoral way. Like, it tries to cover up their own interpretations of the text. That's why nowadays, when I was listening to a cultural discourse between three different religions, and they were discussing just not really discussing which religion is right, but just discussing the religious texts and stuff like that. And one of the Hindu scholars who was there, he was asked, he said that, how come you, what text do you read? And he named some texts, and they said, how come, there's actually two types of text, there's Smriti and there's Shruti. And one is the one which is words spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then the other one is by the devotees of the Lord. And that one, I think that's Smriti. That one isn't supposed to be taken into account because it hasn't been written by God or hasn't been spoken by God. So in that way, people nowadays, they say, oh, but this was written by a devotee, this was written by someone who was a human. But the fact is, it's through the disciplinic succession, it's come down through the ages, and it all came from Krishna's mouth. We see Bhagavad Gita. And that's why Bhagavad Gita is now one of the trusted books. We can say that it was spoken by Krishna himself. So a professional man, again, we try to cover up these interpretations because people, like, they try to give Bhagavatam an interpretation which isn't correct, and in that way, in that form, we need to neglect and we need to ignore those types of literatures. So again, a serious student of the rasa should receive the message of Bhagavatam in the chain of disciplinic succession of Sukadeva Goswami, who describes the Bhagavatam from its very beginning, and not to satisfy some person who has very little knowledge. It is carefully presented to that of a serious and sincere person who can enjoy this ripe fruit of Vedic knowledge. And how can you do this? By simply drinking the nectarian juice coming from the mouth of Sukadeva Goswami. It's very beautifully written here. And it is said that to enjoy this ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge, we accept and we reflect on these by drinking the juice of the from the mouth of Sukadeva Goswami or his bona fide representatives of Srimad Bhagavatam. So now we've talked a lot of philosophical points, and now as I've said before, that sometimes when we think of devotional service, we think, okay, is this actually, like, what's happening here? Nothing seems to be happening. I just continue doing what I know. And demigods actually want our position as humans. They are very not jealous, but they always look at us and they say, oh, I wish I was human, because we actually get to perform devotional services. We actually get to service. We get to pray to Krishna. We get to serve other devotees. We get to chant. We actually get to glorify Krishna through Sankirtan Yagnas and everything. And demigods actually, they sometimes, when we are doing these things on earth, they actually come and visit. And so once in London, Prabhupada told his devotees to put a small asana on the altar for Narad Muni because he was attending the kirtans. And you might be thinking, oh, Narad Muni was attending the kirtans, and it seems like a very odd thing that only Prabhupada could see him. So in America, Prabhupada held a program, and sage and like Narada Muni was present. And another time when reporters came, they asked him, they said, what will happen when you leave this movement? What will happen? And at that time, Prabhupada said that my books will never die. They will live on for 10,000 years. And also during this darshan, it was a very practical exchange of how interviews go. And all of a sudden, Prabhupada, when he was in the middle of the interview, he stopped talking and he looked into the corner of the room, and in the exact same corner, and Prabhupada quickly said, "Look, even Narada Muni is present here." So Prabhupada saw Narada Muni during that time in the room. And this is not the only account. There's so many different accounts where during a kirtan, Prabhupada was leading the kirtan, and he stopped, and then he started reading the Narada Muni Pranam Mantra, and then the devotee at the front of the kirtan, he was told to continue his kirtan, and at the end, the kirtan continued, and at the end of the kirtan, the devotee asked, "Oh, why did you out of nowhere just start speaking this mantra?" And Prabhupada said, "Oh, you didn't see? Narada Muni was at the back enjoying our kirtan." And everyone is so shocked about these things, but it's true. Demigods, Narada Muni, everyone comes once. Even Krishna, he comes to classes, to the kirtans, everything. Everyone is present at that point. So in the Brahma Samhita, chapter 6, verse number 7, it is said, Tam Ishwaram Paramam Maheshwaram Tam Devatanam Paramam Cha Devatam Patim Patinam Paramam Parastad Vidam Devam Bhuvaneshwa Nityam Natasya Karanam Cha Vidyate Natat Samas Cha Vedadikas Cha Tishyate Parasya Saktir Vivideva Shriyate Swabhavika Jnana Bala Kriya Cha. That the Supreme Lord is a controller of all other controllers. He is the greatest of all. He is the greatest of all diverse planetary leaders. Everyone is under his control. All entities are delegated with particular power only by the Supreme Lord. They are not supreme themselves. He is also worshipable by all demigods, and he is a supreme director of all directors. Therefore, he is transcendental to all kinds of material leaders and controllers, and is worshipable by all. There is no one greater than him. He is the supreme cause of all causes. Again, such a beautiful, these two verses, Brahma Samhita chapter 6, verse number 7 and verse number 8. So from this, what we need to know is that we need to really worship Krishna in a more ego way. We feel like, I'll start at this age, or let this year go by. It's very busy, but we don't know when we're going to die. We feel like we think that we're going to live forever, but the fact is that like a plane could just come through this window now, and I could die. And tomorrow morning, in my sleep, I could not wake up, or something would happen within seconds, milliseconds. And we're thinking like, oh, I'm going to live for 100,000 years. I'll be here when my great grandchildren will be here, and we'll all live happily ever after. It doesn't work like that. The fact is that we need to, like very harshly is said, but we need to get up, and we need to do what is right, and do it properly according to what our spiritual masters have told us, our gurus and maharajas have told us, that whatever we do, we should do it sincerely and genuinely, not for the sake of showing other devotees that, oh, I'm actually getting up at this time, or I'm actually giving class, or I'm actually chanting. The only reason you should do these things is so that you can develop that love for Krishna, that Krishna Prem. So I'm going to read two very beautiful verses, one from Srimad Bhagavatam 12.3.52, and so it says, Kriteya Dhyanyato Vishnum Tretayam Jagato Makaha Dvapare Priyacharyayam Kalau Tadhari Kirtanat. So it says, whatever result was obtained in the Satya Yuga by meditating on Vishnu, whatever by meditating on Vishnu in Treta Yuga, by performing sacrifices in this Dwapar Yuga, by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, um, by serving the lotus feet of the Lord, one feet of the sorry, by serving the Lord's lotus feet can be obtained in Kali Yuga simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And then the very classic verse, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nasteva, Nasteva, Nasteva Gatir Anyatha. It says that in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is by chanting the holy names of Hari, Lord Hari. There is no other way. There is no other way. There is no other way. Such distinction through which this is said, such authority, that even if one doesn't agree with what it says, it really gives you that indent that, okay, what, this is something serious. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the same as Lord Krishna, who advented 500 years ago to propagate the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, to really inaugurate the Yuga Dharma for Kali Yuga. And he recommended this Maha Mantra, and is recommended in like an Upanishad. And it is a great, easy, effective, and the most sublime method of deliverance from the darkness of this material world. It can purify the heart, and it can produce pure love for God and proper bhakti. And therefore one should try to participate in such Sankirtan as much as possible. And I'm going to finish off here. Thank you everyone for listening. It's been 3 days of constant classes, so I hope something has come out of it. If anything has come out of these 3 classes, it's all from gurus or lectures that I've listened. It's nothing of my own. But if any mistakes, if I have said anything that's wrong, that is all my mistakes, so please forgive me. Again, thank you everyone for listening. Yeah, so we should try and make, this new year has just started, and so at this point we're at a stage where we should try at least not to, if it's too much, just to start little by chanting that 1 round a day, chanting that 2 rounds a day, getting up early, doing some sort of service to serve our elders or serve great devotees of the Lord. So again, thank you everyone, and Vanchakalpatrobhishya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavlebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavinda ki jai, Shri Radha Gopinath ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanande Haribol. Thank you everyone. Thank you for listening.